Hi everyone, Harry here. In this tutorial, we'll jump into the Sapphire Effect Builder using Grunge and a few other effects to create this really cool watercolor treatment I came up with. So let's dive into After Effects and get started on this. Here's the final product that we'll be making today, this matte reveal with a very soft sort of watercolor kind of look. And there's actually two different reveals going on here. There's the one on the video, and there's the color one kind of behind the image. And we'll be making this all in the Effect Builder in Sapphire. So I'm going to start with my footage here, just some stock footage that I've got, and I'll drop this into a new composition. For my taste, there's a little bit too much of a camera move here, and I'm going to do a little bit of stabilization on this before I get started. So I'm going to use Mocha Pro for this. Okay, so here in Mocha, I'm going to draw a spline around the face. And I'm going to get some of the ears here, the eyes, and some of the mouth, just to have a good solid area to track. And I'm going to track backwards. And then I will track forwards. Okay, so now that we have this tracked, I'll go to the Stabilize tab, and we are going to stabilize X and Y translation. That's fine. And on the borders here, we will center and set this to zoom. So this will fill the borders. And we've stabilized most of the shot. You can still tell that there's a bit of a camera push going on, but it is a lot less dramatic than it was before. And this will help with our effects so that we're not trying to follow the movement of the camera and move this watercolor effect over time. So over here in my module renders, I want to make sure to go to Stabilize and click on Render. So just to compare, here's the original shot, and here is the stabilized version. Okay, so next we'll apply the effect. So let's go into our effects here and go to Sapphire Builder and apply S effect. Now, before I jump in there, I'd like to talk a little bit about the effects that we're going to be using. And I'm going to create a solid just for demonstration here. So this is just kind of a watch and learn kind of thing. So I'm going to apply S Grunge to this. And if you've not used S Grunge that much, it might look at first glance like a plugin that just renders a pre-made texture onto the solid that we've made. But it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. It actually uses multiple stamps to create the texture. And in doing that, we essentially have an unlimited number of variations that we can make on these textures. And there's all kinds of interesting things that we can do here. So if I go up to the stamp density and turn this all the way down to 0 and then turn it back up just a little bit, you can see what those individual stamps are. So we've got these sort of soft textured stamps that as we turn up this density and they overlap with each other, they create this texture. S-Grunge uses 3 different stamps, and each of these stamps can be their own unique texture. They can have their own individual densities. Oops, let's go to stamp 2. So individual densities, colors, brightness, all that kind of stuff. Another cool thing is that we can go to the seed control right here. This is the random seed. And if we change this, this will just totally randomize all of the points and stamps that are used. So like I said, unlimited variations on textures using brush images. So because these are stamps, and we can think of these as just like individual points. So each of these has a point in which it's drawing that stamp. When we use masks, any points that fall outside of the mask won't be drawn, and areas that fall inside the mask will be drawn. So here in After Effects, just for demonstration, I can go and draw a mask on this layer. Now, After Effects masks want to mask the source footage. And I'm simply going to turn that off so that's not masking, and that we just have a mask on the layer, and that I can say use a matte from the path being the mask that I've drawn. And I can say use mask 1. So as I move this mask around, you'll see that only the points that fall inside the mask are being drawn. So only those stamps that fall inside the mask area. So it's not masking the texture itself. It is masking the points that draw the stamps of the texture. And that's an important concept to understand before we move forward. So instead of using a mask, I can also use an image. I can drive this with perhaps a shape. And that's what we'll do in the effect builder. So I'm going to delete this layer and then go to my effect and then click on edit effect. So we'll launch the effect builder. So the first thing I'm going to do is click tab and type grunge so we can apply the grunge effect. So now it's applied on top of the source. This isn't exactly what we want here. I'm going to disconnect the source, and then I'm going to create an external shape to drive this grunge. So I'll do that by using animated shape. If I tap tab, it's actually the very first effect at the very top. And I want an ellipse, and I will set the relative width to 1. And what I want to do is make this a bit more irregular. I want to make this sort of a blobby organic shape rather than a perfect circle. So again, I don't need this fed into there. So I'm going to just disconnect this. I'll click on preview selected node. So I'm only looking at this shape. So to this, I will apply a distortion, and I'm going to use one called Warp Bubble 2. And this uses 2 distortion passes to distort the shape. And in this case, I think that's pretty ideal in terms of what we're looking for. We're looking just kind of for a simple, organic, blobby kind of shape. Now, by default, this does animate, and I'm going to turn that off because that doesn't work for what we're trying to do here. So, or at least in my opinion, if you like it, you're welcome to leave it. So I'll set those both to 0 so we just have a static kind of blobby shape. Now I'll come back to this because there's some other stuff that I want to add, but I want to show why we're going to add this before we proceed. So I've got my grunge, I've got my blobby bubble, and I'm going to connect this bubble over to the matte input of the grunge. Now if I select the grunge, it's only drawing the grunge in that matted area. So if I go back to my animated shape, and I'm going to unselect preview selected node. And actually to see this, I'll need to connect this grunge to the result so we can actually see it. And now if I go to animated shape and I turn the size up and down, we'll see that it's driving those stamps of the grunge. Pretty cool. Now, as I turn this on, you'll see that these kind of pop on. They go from mostly on to mostly off. There's maybe a tiny bit of a fade there. And the reason is that the edges of this shape here are pretty sharp. There's a little bit of anti-aliasing on them, which is why we see a little bit of a fade in. But to make this a bit more smooth, I'm going to add a blur. I just wanted to show you why I was going to add the blur before I dropped a blur on here. So now I've got a blur effect on here, and I'll uncheck preview selected node, go back to my animated shape. And as I turn the size up, you can see that's a lot more smooth of a transition. Pretty cool. Now let's go back to grunge. And I kind of like the default settings, quite honestly. The garage floor stamp is pretty good. I'm going to go up to the density and just make it a bit more, well, dense, solid. I'll turn the sizes down so it's just a bit more compact and solid on the inside because we'll be using this as a matte on our source footage. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. I'm using my scroll wheel on my mouse. So I've got my grunge rendering, I've got my shape stuff over here, and that's feeding into the result. And now I want to take this source footage, which we have up here. We have a node for our source, and combine it with the grunge. And I'm going to do this with a layer node. Tap tab and type layer. So for this layer input, I don't want to feed the grunge into the input. I want to feed my source into the foreground input. And I want to feed the grunge into the matte input. And there, now we've got our sort of textured matte. I can easily animate it on and off using this circle size. Now to add the color behind it, we're essentially going to do another pass of this grunge. So I'm going to click on this grunge and click on duplicate. And at this point, it would be good to start labeling things. So this is going to be my grunge matte. And this one over here is going to be grunge color. And I'll feed this grunge color matte, the same matte that I'm feeding this grunge matte here. So if I pull this over, pull that in right there, I'll click on previous selected node and click on this grunge color. It's essentially doing the exact same thing. Now, before I start changing too much, I want to focus on the overall look of this grunge, which is changing it from the garage floor texture to the watercolor drops. And for this stamp 1 density, I'll turn that up quite a bit. Now, these have their own individual color maps in here, so I can simply work with these colors right here to make them feel a bit more watercolory. So I'll go in here and stamp 1, stamp 2, maybe some blues and purples. And those are essentially color maps, like duotone mapping. And those will be affected by the overall brightness. So we can turn up that brightness and give it a bit more color like that. And then we've got these kind of dark ones here with this paint spray. I think the paint spray is okay, but I will change those colors as well. So now that I've got my grungy, colorful background that is using my watercolor drops texture, and I've got my source matted with this other grunge matte, I can put these together. And if I drag this grunge color output into the background, we should see these composited together. Now, if you're worried that we are matting the grunge color background with the same style of grunge matte that is going to the foreground, actually, you don't need to worry because the matte input only works on the foreground. And that's actually something I learned today. If I create a shape, I'll just create a basic shape and disconnect this. And if I bring this shape in to this layer input and I select this, you'll see that the source input into the foreground is matted with the shape. This grunge color input in the background is not affected by the matte. So let's get rid of that, drop this back over here, and should be pretty good. At this point, I would want to start kind of cleaning up my parameters that'll be published back into the effect controls. So I will go to my shape here, turn off all of these parameters, and I probably want the center and the size. Here, I just want the blur amount on the blur, how much I'm softening it. This warp bubble, I don't think I need a whole lot. If I need to tweak this, I'll just come back into the effect builder. This grunge matte, maybe I will publish the stamp size, opacity, and stamp brightness. In fact, I don't think we even need the brightness because all we're using is the alpha channel of this. So that's fine. I can label this. I'll just label this as the composite. This is pretty much handling all the compositing needs of this scene. It's grunge color output we've already labeled, and I will turn off everything except for stamp, density, size, opacity, brightness, and the colors. So I'll turn those on for stamp 1 and stamp 2. I'm not using stamp 3. So stamp 1, I'll turn all of these on. I'll turn on the stamp 2 density. And I think it's important to have the seed available just to change the overall look of that background. So I think that pretty much covers it. I'll click on OK, jump back to After Effects, and this is on a dark background, which doesn't look bad, but I like the idea of having kind of a light background. So I'll just create a solid, click OK, and drop this behind. There, and to do a reveal, all I need to do is animate this animated shape. I can always adjust the center of it, like so. This is why I stabilized it, because this is a pretty area-specific effect. So if it's moving too much, and then we have to animate this, and it can look kind of weird moving this around too much. So let's just kind of center it right there. And then about over 2.5 seconds, we'll have the size animate. So I'll click on the stopwatch to animate the size. Click here, set that to 0. Tap U to show my keyframes, and we'll F9 that so that it has a little bit of an easy ease in. And then now it looks like what's happening is because I duplicated the effect from Grunge 1 to Grunge 2, and they are sharing the same random seed, that I should probably go in here to Grunge, the color Grunge, and just change this random seed so that they aren't identical, because it looks a little weird with them being completely identical like that. There you go, a self-contained watercolor effect that you can drag and drop on your footage. So if you're using this sort of as a motif for a video, and you bring in another video, it's just a matter of applying that same effect. So over here, now that I've got this all defined, I can simply save this as my watercolor reveal. So now over here, I can simply go to Builder, S Effect, click on Load Preset, search for Watercolor Reveal, which is right here. Double click on that. And now I've got the same effect. Now for this, for a motorcyclist, I might want to make it a little less colorful and a bit more dark. Take out some of these colors. In fact, I could probably bring that background color size down just a bit, just to focus on the grunge shape itself. So there you go, super fast, super flexible watercolor preset built with the Sapphire Effect Builder. I had a lot of fun designing this one. And that pretty much covers the effect. My name's Harry Frank for Boris FX. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can get all the great content coming out almost every day. You will learn so much. So click the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you for watching.